So, so today we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics, and that's pay attention to people, not just cards. And to give you a little foundation, if you look at any competition, it doesn't have to just be poker, but it's more especially those in poker because when we're at a poker table, it's correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like taking a doctorate final exam in math, in psychology, in philosophy, sociology. You go down the list of all the skills you need as a poker table, and it's like a final oral exam that you have to do. So, in these, especially in poker, you're going to find that consistently the ones that repeat these amazing results. And we're not talking about people that have an upswing and a breakout year and like a shooting star that just fizzles out. We're talking about the comets that keep on coming back over and over again. One common denominator is their awareness, and most of them are very spiritually aware. And awareness is knowledge. Like we're becoming more aware just by being on this call every day. We talked about that yesterday, right, Sherry? Right?
Right on.
Not knowledge is power. So at the poker table, it's even more especially important that we're aware. You see, it's danger is sneaking up on us without us knowing. And we just don't know where it's going to come from. And it usually at a poker table happens, it blindsides us because it happens when we're doing things routine, when everything seems perfectly normal. And that's when the freaking mountain lions come out of the trees and the mountains and the rocks and attack us when we least suspect it. Okay. And I'll give you a real life example of something that happened to me yesterday at the WSOP that everybody should be aware of this, but it's a good example of I'm pretty spiritually awake and aware and knowledgeable and like you guys, and yet this happened to me. So, um, I used to drink while I played poker, and that always took away from my optimum game. It does. I don't care who you are. Yes, I won a ring drunk once. I'll admit that. But for the most part, you're not going to be able to repeat those drunken results. Okay. And there is that sweet spot when you have an alcoholic beverage. Even Daniel Negreanu has talked about this. So, and we're going to get into this on Monday. Monday's topic is going to be alcohol, cannabis, drugs, the pros and cons. We're going to go back to like examples like about people like Stu Unger. We're going to cover all that on Monday. So I'm not going to go on that tangent. But just so you know, when I'm in my optimum game, I've realized I cannot drink alcohol. And I like to drink. So what happened a couple of weeks ago, Colette turned me on to somebody at her table ordered a Heineken 00, alcohol-free Heineken, and that shit is good. It You could drink beers with the guys and the girls and everybody, and be a part of the gang, and you could cover the label. They think you're slamming beers. It's not alcohol. Now I get to WSOP and I order at the bar. You can order a Heineken 00, but sitting at the tables. They don't have bottles of beer. They have cups, and they don't have the Heineken Zero, but they have next best thing. They have Corona alcohol free alcohol in the cups. Now, this is on me. I have this young new waitress, brand new, hardly speaks any English. Okay. I had been ordering these Corona alcohol free drinks, and I'm loving these beers. This waitress comes along, somebody new. I say Corona alcohol free. Yeah, 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 yeah. I thought she understood me. She comes back, she gives me my beer. Now, keep in mind, these alcohol free beers taste just like a real beer. Well, wouldn't you know it? Halfway through that beer, I start to feel buzzed. She brought me a real alcoholic beer by accident. Or maybe she didn't understand. Now, I was blindsided. Here I am, super aware, thinking who the fuck I am. And I can't even. What if I was an alcoholic where I don't drink any alcohol? I would have had an alcoholic beverage. You know what I mean? So you need to be aware of these things. The moral of that story is don't drink something unless you know what's in what container it's coming out of. So you're better off just going down to the bar, putting $10 in a slot machine and getting a free one. Because they're like $14 at the bar, but you get it free if you have money in the slot machine, as opposed to ordering this. Now, why did I say this? Well, um, we need to be able to read everybody at the table and the stories they tell, because sometimes people accidentally tell one story that throws us off. So a good example of this, we all know. Sherry, do you like the movie Molly's Game?
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember the scene when Bad Brad was in a pot with the guy that went on tilt that night and lost all his goddamn money?
Right.
And this guy is an excellent poker player, plays GTO poker by the book, reads people, yada, 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 but he didn't do the first golden rule. And that is get to know every one of your players, know who they are. So he didn't know any better. And this, you guys have to watch the movie. I'm not going to give it away, but there's a scene where a very inexperienced, the worst player at the table, the fish, makes a all-in bet with nothing other than what's on the board, and it throws off this other player who folds the second best nuts, a second best full house, because he thought for sure this other player, the only way they would shove all in on him is if he had the nuts. Perfect example. Okay, everybody get that? You're on the same page. All right. Um, Poker might be played with cards, but it's won through people. If all you're doing is staring at your own hand on the board, you're missing half the game. Actually, you're missing more than half. Every player at the table is telling this story all night long. Some people tell it through bet sizing. Some tell it with their timing. Some tell it with posture, breathing, chatter, silence, frustration, carelessness, fake confidence like Bad Brad, right? Or sudden stillness. The truth is, people leak. They leak out their patterns, their emotions, their habits, their intentions. We just have to be awakened, spiritually awakened to the point where we see all of this. Okay? The sharper you become at that, and the more spiritually awakened you become, the more you start noticing these things, and the less that you need to really rely on the deck to save you. That's why sometimes you see these really amazing pros make these most amazing. I'll tell you who did it the best, Gus Hansen. Okay. He doesn't follow anything GT. No. He's following his intuition and he's playing his players, right? Um, Gus Hansen Gus Hansen once said, and I think it's funny. He says he wipes his ass with better hands than he has check raised or gone all in with and win pots. It's crazy, but it's true because he's playing his players, not his cards. Because weak players are usually locked into their own little bubble, aren't they? Right? They look at their cards, they think about themselves, they worry about their own results, and they tune out the rest of the room. But the stronger players have this wider lens. They pay attention. We pay attention when we're not in the hand. We study who overvalues top pairs. We study who hates the full draws. We like to know who gets cute with monsters and who over bluffs to scare cards. Who checks too quickly, who when they're weak, and who suddenly gets the very like Hollywood when they're strong, right? But now let me be clear. Having this awareness is not like a meal ticket and permission to become some kind of like fancy novelist every time somebody scratches their nose. Okay. Because not everything means something. Okay. Poker's not a circus of magic tells, but the patterns are there. The repetition is there. And, if we pay attention, we could see it. Okay. Because like some people, they talk too much when they bluff. Some go silent when they're strong, right? Some handle chips differently when they're excited, but you're never going to be able to know who does what and when they're doing it unless you're watching the story. Okay. There's some universal truths, and you have to read books like my buddy Mike Caro. When I worked on the Poker God series, I was very fortunate to have Mike Caro as my advisor on a lot of the stuff that I wrote in the books. And I've spent hours, and when you're on the phone with Mike Caro, it's like having a conversation with Cuz. You actually have to do a lot more listening, and you don't get to say too many things, but what comes out of their mouth is very informative. So if you read Mike's books about tells, some of this stuff, it doesn't, the game might have changed, but people have not. The tells of the past are still the tells of today. And yeah, people are trying to learn things. Like now you see a lot of players, and Sherry, you see it all the time, right? Where they cover their carotid artery because they don't want people to see their pulse, right? It, and if you listen to this and you ever notice that, look at the big pros on TV, and a lot of them have their hand. Like Chewy does it all the time. Takes his sweatshirt and he puts his hand against his neck. Okay. And they're trying to hide their pulse, but also get a barometer on their own, like, where am I, right? So players are getting good at hiding their tells, but for the average player, they don't even know what their tells are. They don't think anybody's going to get a read off of them. Okay. And some things they can't hide, like the timing of their tells, the bet sizing. So you could do this online too, right? You could figure you will if you play online enough, you just kind of get these tells from the players. Why that person takes so long? Because they're nervous. They don't know how much to bet, right? These things happen. Okay. And there's another reason paying attention matters. It gets us out of our own head. So when we're focused outward, we become less trapped in the emotional residue of like that last hand we just lost or that bad decision we made. We have to move on because the story keeps on going. Like I wrote in the book, The Poker Dance, there's this whole choreography going on and we need to just keep up with it. Okay. So when we stop obsessing over our own pain and we start collecting useful information from everybody else, that's positive EV all day long, all day long. So a very strong habit is to choose one player in orbit, study that player. How do they enter pots? What do they do when they're challenged? How much do they react after losing? All right. Now, if you've ever been in a poker tournament with me, you'll notice that I get out of my seat a lot. Okay. And Martin Cabral, we were talking about him getting out of his seat. There's reasons why some of us get out of our seat. We don't want the whole world to know, but what we're actually doing is sometimes, like if I'm in a 4 or 5 seat, 3, 4, or 5 seat, and the player to my left or right is involved in a big hand with somebody in the 1 or the 9 seat, I can't see what tells my player to my left or right of me are giving. So I will just get out of my seat, stand behind the dealer, pretend I'm doing my stretches, my meditation, but I'm paying attention. Now I got a bird's eye view from behind player 1 or player 9. What does player 5 look like? Because if we last long enough, I'm going to be at the final table with that player face to face, and I need their tells. All right. These are little tricks a lot of us do, but some people just stay in their seat and they don't have a good view of the whole table. All right. These are little tricks, very important, but it's all part of the awareness. So you have to also watch how people react after they lose and understand who just experienced the bad loss. So you could have a player with a tiny chip stack. It doesn't mean they're a bad player. They could have just suffered a bad beat. They could have been the chip leader before you got to the table, but how would you know? Okay, so you need to catch up to the story. All right. Over time, the game gets louder, the music gets louder, because once you become attuned to this, you can't stop listening. Okay, you start hearing stuff, seeing stuff, and it's like sometimes I think I'm imagining stuff. It's like, is this player always lean back in his chair when he has an ace in his hand? And guess what? He does. I don't know. These people, I'm not going to tell anybody this, but I just picked up the most easiest tell around, right? These things happen. Now listen, the board still matters. Your cards still matter. But the people matter.